I would like to now invite Tito Scohel, Anthony Jensen, and Richard O'Leary to the hot seat to do an overview of cooperatives. But before we go into that, I'd like to very quickly let you know that on that desk, on the left-hand side, on my left-hand side, the first desk, there are a bunch of registration sheets for workshops and excursions following today. So if you would like to sign in to any of those, please go and talk to me. We have 4 workshops coming up. One is basic elements of a business plan. The second one is how to access finance. The third one is business structures, and the fourth one is marketing your products and services. So we will go a lot in depth into what we talked about today and give you information. Now the first workshop is free, and we have that running on 2 different days. The last 3 workshops, we're doing it in an interesting way. We are going to charge you $25 per workshop, or we will do 3 workshops for $50. And what we will do is we will put all this money into a fund, and for someone who would attend all 3 workshops, we will draw it at the last workshop, and you will get all of that money to start your social enterprise. So that will be the seed funding for your social enterprise. So hopefully, if we have enough people put in money, we should have not a lot of money, but we should have a decent amount to start with. And if we can get other people pledging, other organizations and agencies, and this I won't guarantee, but this is something we're going to try, pledging to match that funding or add a bit to that funding, we might be able to give you a fairly decent amount. So please don't think 100,000, because that's not going to happen. But hopefully 1,000, or if we are lucky, maybe a couple of thousand, depending on how many people we have. So please register for the workshop.
$10?
Yes, and also, thank you, Pete. If you are on a concession, we do the workshops for $10 per workshop. So it's a pretty good deal, hey? 3, you do, what was it? You said pick 2 and 1 for free, basically, right?
Yeah, almost. But $10 for concession means you're students or you are on social benefit, yeah.
Okay, thank you. So now we move on to an overview about cooperatives. Now you might be thinking, why are cooperatives? Oh, sorry, maybe it's good. Can you hear me at the back? No, you can't, can you? I can't speak very loud.
Hello, can you hear me? Okay. Thanks, Nick. So if you're wondering why cooperatives are in the middle of a social enterprise session, it's because I've had the good fortune to meet up with Anthony Jensen, who's sitting in the middle here, when he facilitated a cooperative that we were trying to support. So basically we started as a social enterprise in farming, realized we were not going to get very far with that, and we are now in the process of trying to turn it into a backyard growers cooperative, and we asked Anthony to kindly come in and facilitate that process. And while we were doing that, I started thinking about how cooperatives could be a great vehicle, especially in that space where we work with a lot of clients who don't have the networks that we were talking about earlier, or who don't have those resources or skills, where they can come together and work in that space together with each other and support each other in developing a cooperative model to go forward. Now, I myself, I have to admit, I didn't know much about the cooperative sector and how to set one up or what to do with it, which is why we had Anthony coming. And once we were chatting, we also realized a lot of people in the sector, especially in the social enterprise space, may not be aware of cooperatives and how to set cooperatives up. So we invited them to give us a bit of a quick overview on cooperatives and for you to be able to know where you can access information. Now, let me introduce them properly. Tito is from Blacktown City Council. Secretly, he sneaked out of his job today, so don't tell anyone. Anthony Jensen is from the University of Sydney, and Richard O'Leary is the Secretary of the Cooperatives Federation of New South Wales. And Richard is what I call our sort of guru. He rocks up to these meetings that we have and just says the most amazingly wise thing. And I am always in awe of whatever he says. So, gentlemen, I'll hand over to you. Thank you.
Can I turn the mic off and have the process here? My kids always say I'm really yelling, mean dad. And when I use the microphone, my accent gets really magnified. I tried many times. For 15 years, I tried to assimilate in Sydney, Sydney culture. I spent a lot of time in the pub trying to improve my accent. I moved to Penrith, living amongst the Bogans to pick up the Bogan accent, but I failed. And microphone does make it worse, all right? And I don't want to leave early than intended. I work for Blacktown City Council, which is the largest Western Sydney Council area by population. We have 312,000 plus people living in Blacktown. It is one of the poorest council and one of the largest council in Australia, I think, financially. Now, my job primarily is to support community growth with funding and grants. And Blacktown Council is the only council in Eastern Sydney that has no money to give out to the community. So the only thing I do, the money I get from club grants or with us or community services money that I used to give out to the communities for the last 5 years. Over the last 3 years, I realized that I'm much more hated in the community because I can't give out much money. Because money is shrinking. So no money from the state, no money from the feds, and council has no money. And I also, I host a community conference every year. And I get more requests from the community organization for more money to give them out because it's a large community and they don't have much money to support the local communities. Then I have to go out and find some ways how to support those people with money. I tried a lot of the social enterprises model. Sari was there. I got about 20 managers to come and get some money from her and move on. I think she'd never had a client from Blacktown. 5 years ago, I did a conference. Mark Daniel was the chief, one of the guest speaker, but he was the keynote speaker. And after the conference, we had about 8 to 10 social enterprises came off Blacktown council areas. And out of 10, I think 2 are somehow survived. And all of the 8 are gone. Don't exist anymore. He's next to Blacktown Council. Harry, did you have a client in Blacktown? I don't know, 1 or 2?
Yes.
Okay. And I'm from Bangladesh. When I was in the early days of university, I worked for Grameen Bank, which is a $13 billion microcredit social enterprise. But nothing happened in Blacktown. So I was trying to find out some model by which big NGOs can survive after 2016. As you know, the funding reform kicks in 2016, which is next year. So a lot of my colleagues in council are going to have a job after July 2016. A lot of the aged care care worker are looking the job after June this year, I think. A lot of the DOs, map workers are going to leave the sector. Every year in February, when I come back from holiday, I send out a welcome message email to everybody. I have a large 700 email list, 700 NGOs and workers on my list. This year, I have almost 20 to 50% email bounced back to me saying they're no longer working on their jobs. So which is a big crisis in Blacktown because council being small, and we have such a larger community support. If the NGOs fail, then we cannot solve them. And ultimately, it will come to Blacktown Council. Okay, so I was looking around for a model by which the NGOs can support themselves and sustain themselves. I understand this may not apply to you guys because you are smart people, you can survive in the market economy, but a lot of the big welfare organizations cannot survive because most of them don't have much of the marketing skill for how to survive in the market economy. Last year, we did an informal study, and we found out that out of 200 plus NGOs in Blacktown, only 13 going to survive. If they form some kind of consortia or merger, without that they can survive because after 2016, any NGO to survive, they have to write their own tender, they have to compete in the open marketplace and win like SSI. If they can't get the money, like what happened to Red Cross, they didn't have the money, SSI got the money. So you either win the contract, be bigger and survive, or you perish. we lost about 3 large women's services in Blacktown, which has been operating for 25 to 40 years. They're all gone now. So domestic violence services is no longer there. And we have the highest number of FVOs in Blacktown, highest number of livings in Blacktown, but we don't have any support service anymore. So I was looking for a different model, and then I found out Anthony, Susie, Richard, they're working on a cooperative model, which I found really interesting because it's a business model, but it is right-based and shareholder-based model, whereby, a couple of employees from, say, health NGO or welfare NGO can form a cooperative, write a tender, win the tender, and run a service the same way. But the good thing about them would be, whatever money they get, it can be shared around the employees. So the employees would be the shareholder. They'll get the money, and they will deliver services in a much more equitable way in comparison to the full profit organizations who might move in. You know what's happening in Queensland and aged care services. It's a full profit aged care services. People are dying or getting abused by the employees. There's no registered nurse in there. So if the full profit move in, it's not going to be much better for the community sector or for the clients or for the consumers. But if we can support the cooperatives or a welfare NGO who is having going through having a cooperative model, and they would serve better the community. So we'll get some good out of those models. So that's why I think that if CDA is formed, and a lot of the NGOs can form some consortia or merger, and they, from the association model, if they move to cooperative model, get their own money, and continue to serve the local community, that'll be much more valuable model for them. So that's how I started supporting CDA in Blacktown. So now I'm going to stop here and let Anthony and Richard explain how the cooperative work, what are the benefits, and how the NGOs can take benefit out of CDA model.
Thank you, everyone. It certainly has been great to be here today. I think we're all in the same package. We're talking about social enterprise, and in a way, cooperatives are commerce with a conscience. And I can't think of any better way of actually doing business. The cooperative structure does lend itself to a fairness and a fair go, and we, as cooperatives, feel great about that. Cooperative history in Australia is quite interesting. The cooperatives were first started, they're mainly producer cooperatives, and we've got cooperatives around like Norco, Hastings, Clay and so forth, all producer cooperatives. Probably have reinvented themselves about 5 times in their lifetime, and we talk about actually failures. You're talking about cooperatives that have been around well over 100 years and are getting stronger and stronger. And that's about community ownership, but it's about passion, and it's about being relevant to today's society and community. The federations which actually support those have certainly been around since 1919 in Western Australia, and continuing on through New South Wales and others. The biggest threat to cooperatives is demutualisation. It's about actually owners starting to see some value in their business, that it's not just social value. And they then try to unlock that value. And we've seen many great cooperatives basically being listed, and then of course the owners of the day taking the money and running. But generally speaking, they're cheating the owners of yesterday. And of course there's a great topic on about actually social tax to actually keep the money back in the community rather than giving it to members that are actually cashing out. The international year 2012 was a great year. It was interesting that it was also the international year, it was the International Year of Cooperatives, but it was also the National Year of Farmers. And of course, farming cooperatives were in fact probably the very first cooperatives in Australia. Next. What is a cooperative? Well, it's interesting. I'll just read this particular, the A cooperative is an autonomous association of persons united voluntarily to meet their common economic, social and cultural needs and aspirations through a jointly owned and democratically controlled enterprise. That's an international cooperative definition. It does say social. Anthony and I would actually, lots of times we've talked about social good in cooperatives. I take the view that cooperatives are really not a social enterprise, but they have social good in their values and ethical values in particular. The history of cooperatives is actually producers and many other types of cooperatives, which I'll go into a little bit further. But a cooperative is a member-owned enterprise governed by principles, values that are actually legislated values. Legislated. There's no other enterprise that actually has those legislated values. And that's why cooperatives, to be honest, have lasted existence. Who's involved in cooperatives? Well, look at the worldwide component, but look at the Australian component. 13.5 million members. I might add, most of them don't know that they're in cooperatives. 7 million automotive club members like NRMA and so forth. Most of them don't know technically that they're in cooperatives. When you look at the top 10 cooperatives in Australia, most of them are in the agricultural area. In New South Wales. The Dairy Farmers Cooperative, which of course was a demutualised cooperative. The Dairy Farmers component is still a cooperative, but the processing part is actually owned in a way by Kirin, which of course is a Japanese brewer. So they make milk as well as beer. And of course you're seeing them, but Namoi Cotton, Norco, Sugar Milling Cooperative New South Wales, all major cooperatives and are still going strongly today. There are all types of cooperatives. We're talking about in food, housing, childcare, just many, as one of the speakers earlier today said about social enterprise being basically in every industry. I think cooperatives generally are in that as well. In New South Wales we have around 600 to 700 cooperatives, and nationwide, it was mentioned today 2,000, but I think it's about 1,600. There are some really interesting cooperatives I've just mentioned, like Alpha House there. The one that my cooperative, Mackay Regional Cooperative, was instrumental in forming was the Cooperative Food Group. We started that in 2013, 33 members, not trying to compete with an independent retailing wholesaler like Metcash through its IGA banner, but using the very power that they've got to actually build a cooperative. That cooperative will actually be, if I go back there, that cooperative will actually be within the top 50 within 5 years. That's how fast it's growing, and it's about social good, but it's also about member benefit. Yeah. Cooperative values and principles. Now, obviously, a voluntary open membership. The most important principle there is about democratic member control. One vote, no matter how much equity you've got. Bear in mind you are limited in cooperatives, generally to a limited equity. But what happens is that cooperatives actually can fund through cooperative units or in fact debentures. But generally the equity, from an accountant's point of view, which always hurts me, the equity is actually in the balance sheet as a liability rather than actually in the equity section of the balance sheet, because the cooperative has to buy its shares back from members that either want to exit or actually not actively involved in the cooperative, and their shares will be back from them. So then you look at the other thing, concern for the community, education, training and information, autonomy and independence. We saw some of those values in social enterprise earlier today. They're being replicated again, legislated replication. And of course those values about self-help, really important in cooperatives. Self-responsibility, democracy and equity, and equality and solidarity. Great. And overpinning those, if we look at the next one, is ethical values, openness, honesty, social responsibility, and of course caring for others. That is the guts of cooperatives. And that's why cooperatives such as Norco and Hastings and others have lasted in excess of 100 years. Tranby was started in 1958, the educational cooperative, Aboriginal education cooperative in the city. So a long way to go, but doing the job. National Year was a great year. It was actually the showcase of cooperative. It was our time to shine. And clearly we had great activities going right through that year, but we got some legacies from that. The next slide. The legacies were the formation of the Business Council for Cooperatives and Mutuals. We went into that year saying we're going to come out of this, we're just not going to talk about what's good for us, we're going to get some results. And one of those results was that Business Council of Cooperatives and Mutuals. Now, that was created by the CEOs of the top 100 and chairs of the top 100 cooperatives, basically sitting down, workshopping, strengthening up what was going to be that legacy. And of course, we're now actually at the federal level. We're talking to government and others about, and internationally as well, about the cooperative movement and what's good for cooperatives, and obviously driving it down, what's good for members, and driving it down further, what's good for community. I'm sorry, I shouldn't move my hands in. The actual, we've had a lot of support from the Mid-North Coast Regional Development Board. There are 12 RDA boards in New South Wales, and we're hoping to actually streamline the cooperative movement through those as part of that legacy as well. There is recognition in the charter of the RDAs for social business and cooperatives and so forth, but there's not enough recognition or not enough participation by the board members of those RDAs. We're trying to change that. Even this week, at the latter part of the week meeting, I'll be talking about cooperatives in an RDA environment. And then, of course, the Australian Institute, Who Knew Australians Were So Cooperative, was a great research paper on cooperatives in that year. Next one. The cooperative legislation, the national legislation, which of course in a way is a bit of a furphy, it is national legislation, it's reformed legislation. Everyone signed up to actually developing that legislation right throughout the states and the territories, but only New South Wales and Victoria have really taken that on board. But the others are complying with the national legislation. New South Wales refocus on cooperative state federations and regional zones, and we're going to obviously look at building that membership over the next 10 years. Next one. And then, of course, who would you contact? Well, Business Council, Cooperatives in Australia. There's a great handbook that is actually on the development of cooperatives. And then, of course, the Federation. And my own co-op, just making a comment. We've always been involved with State Federation, always been involved with community. We take partnership, we invest in other cooperatives, which is quite interesting, not from the point of view of scalping them, but from the point of view of actually helping in the development of those cooperatives. We have equity in Hastings Cooperative, we have equity in Nambucca Cooperative, we have a very strong interest in the New South Wales Federation, and then on top of that, we actually are a core member of the Cooperative Food Group and many other organisations. We also take small equity in some of our social businesses like aged care, community radio, childcare and so forth in our communities. Thank you. Over to Anthony.
Can you hear me now? Is that working? Okay. While the slides are coming, they're up. Okay. But first of all, I just want to thank Sushi for putting this event on. It's a fantastic demonstration of social enterprise. But what I think for me, it's terrific to see social enterprises and cooperatives being on the same podium. And we've talked about social enterprises. I see a cooperative as a social enterprise, a form of social enterprise, because it has both economic and social goals. And Richard has described the values and ethics, the mission to build a better world, to build a better society, a more equitable and fair society. So cooperatives are very much well placed to be a structure that's well suited for a social enterprise. Look, I haven't got a lot of time, but all I want to do, my objective of my talk is just to start a conversation with you about the applicability of cooperatives in our society today. Thanks. Look, I don't think the prognosis for Western capitalism and the world is that great. Most of the stuff I read of 10 to 15 years out is not good. We've got a serious environmental problem, which most of the experts think is probably not solvable by the market. And we have some tsunami of environmental problems that are emerging. Economically, it's the wealth, the concentration of wealth we have through the investor model, which cannot help itself but create or concentrate wealth, where 85 people own more wealth than half the world's poorer population. I mean, these things are just very dysfunctional. So we're in a sort of a very difficult situation. And into that sort of scenario, thanks, we have, and what I find very exciting is the blueprint for a cooperative decade. Richard's explained the United Nations Year of Cooperation. But into this scenario of unsustainable economic and environmental issues, we have this document, a blueprint for a cooperative decade, where it points to how the cooperative can reduce the reliance on the investor model, which is the one that's sort of creating the problems. And the ICA produced a mission statement. That's the International Cooperative Alliance, which is the body that looks after the 1 billion people who are in cooperatives around the world. The ambition is to position cooperatives to become the fastest growing form of enterprise, the acknowledged leader in economic and social environmental sustainability, and the model preferred by the people. So that's the ambitious task, and I see this massive cooperative movement as like a sleeping giant, economic and social giant within the economic community, which is now starting to raise itself to deal with this massive problem. Thanks. And how are they going to do it? Because they're going to promote the cooperative business model. And the cooperative business model has very clear values and distinguishing features from other models. Participation, first of all, it differentiates itself by participation. That is the key thing in this world today, that people want to participate in their lives and make decisions about their lives. And that's what the cooperative offers. And it's sustainable because of it has a mission to preserve the economic and environmental landscape. And it's got an identity, a mantra for creating a better world. So based on these three factors, we have the cooperative business model, and to succeed, it needs to overcome these two big issues about the legal framework, which Richard's talked about, which has been resolved in Australia, and what we've already talked about. That was a very inspiring session, hearing about capital, because that has been one of the big issues of ordinary people starting a business. How do they get capital? And that was a great session. So next. So participation. Cooperatives, the assumption is, are better because they give individuals participation through ownership, which makes them inherently more engaging. The research I've done at the university, and I've done this on cooperatives in Italy, is very clear there's a very clear relationship between the influence people have in their work and in their membership and their satisfaction. And this has impacts on the health of their lives and also the performance and the productivity and resilience of the company they're in, the cooperative they're in. Sustainable communities is a very, very, very interesting bit of research that was done in Italy on 3 different towns. One had, the first one, you can see that 26% of the population were in a cooperative. In the next one, there was 13%, and in the next town, Solo, there was 0%. And what the research showed was that the higher the percentage of people in a cooperative, there were fewer cars, more blood donations, less crime, marriages lasted longer, kids stayed at school longer, used less electricity, etc. And the top Imola, the most comfortable, less threatened by competition, the healthiest and least violent. Cardiovascular mortality significantly lower. People live longer. So what we're saying is that equality is good for your health, and conversely, inequality has been shown to be bad for your health. So sustainable communities, and finally identity, which we have been talking about, how cooperatives are a better business model that puts people at the heart of the decision making and brings a greater sense of fair play. And that was all over yesterday's Telegraph about this initiative to bring fair play to Western Sydney. So when I asked people who worked in cooperatives, do they see this as a way of building a better society? And it was on a Likert scale, say out of 6, we were getting a score of 5, because people were seeing this as a way of building a better society. Thanks. So we know the Co-op Bookshop, but the important thing is, next one, that cooperatives are an economic and social model that has to survive in the marketplace. And the Cooperative Bookshop is an example of how they reinvented themselves. You know, like students no longer buying books, photocopying books, getting them online. What do we do? And they've reinvented themselves, and they've defined a whole new lot of needs that their members have. So it's not just a soft hearts, it's hard heads and soft hearts type of business. Next. Okay, so but what the discussion, and I urge you to look at this blueprint, download it and look at it. What the discussion's about is what type of capitalism do we want? And a new paradigm of capital. You know, what type of capital is it? Is it finance capital? Is it social capital? Is it spiritual capital? You know, we're thinking about the type of society that we want, and this document, the cooperative movement, I see as leading this discussion. You know, it says here, this is the Blue Ribbon Commission on Cooperative Capital, that people remain the core, but profit is not an anathema. From short-term opportunism to long-term sustainability. That's how we've got to move. And there's a whole lot of thought pieces that have been put out by the ICA.
And there's only 1 minute.
This is this last slide, yeah. So, when the cooperative pioneers in 1844 first implemented their new ideas, there was this cooperative movement swept across the United Kingdom to deal with those issues of the Industrial Revolution. Today, those ideas are needed by all people. I'm quoting from the document. It is a global community which has been failed by the traditional way of doing business, where profits and growth are more important than sustainability, and the private interest of some is more important than the public interest of everyone. Cooperative ideas work, but most people do not know that today. But for this blueprint to be meaningful and effective, it needs to be taken up and endorsed by national bodies, by individual societies, by all people who believe in the cooperative way and the social enterprise way, may we add, of doing business. Cooperatives must lead the way by cooperating amongst themselves. So one of the legacies of this document, I hope, will be that we actually form this CDA in Western Sydney, that we're successful in doing that, and that we are able to engage in making the Western Sydney a fairer and more dynamic community. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Anthony, Richard, and Tito. I won't have time for questions for the three of them, but if you want to mill around, would you be available for the next 5 minutes or so? You can talk to them one-on-one. So this brings us to the end of our workshop. Thank you to all of you for attending and going the distance with us. Good luck to the students at the School of Social Entrepreneurs with your projects. And a big thank you to all the speakers and my partners in crime, Fairfield City Council, Ping Tang, and David Cameron, Stars, Des Ramsey, and Sebastian here, who volunteers with us and did the clicking, and Nikki, who did the clicking as well, who's probably left now. I'd like to just leave you with one question. I watched a TED Talk the other day, and the question this guy asked is, what does freedom mean to you? To him, it meant taking his newly born kid and wife, selling all their crap, the house, etc., and backpacking in Australia. He was an American. But the point he was trying to make is, what does it mean to you, and how would you go about attaining what that means? And I was thinking about that question, and I thought, well, perhaps if I could do my own social enterprise and work somewhere on my own terms, perhaps that, for me, could define freedom. So anyway, the answer will differ for all of you, but I'd like to leave you with that thought, and thank you so much once again.
Thank you.